Hi, this is Scott from 410 Creative with a quick video on how to use the Visual Composer plugin for editing pages in WordPress. You'll notice here that I have the Visual Composer plugin enabled on my install of WordPress, and I have a couple pages in the system here. So we're going to go ahead and edit our sample page. Default WordPress editor loads like this, where we have buttons such as Add Media, and the top row of editor buttons here, second row. And there's quite a bit that we can do within this page. If we're going to make a more complex page layout, we can utilize the Visual Composer plugin by clicking on this backend editor, and it will transfer whatever content was currently in the editor into a new text block, or if you delete it like I did, you'll start fresh. You have two different ways to get started building your page, either by adding elements or by adding a template. You can also add a text block, but it's really doing the same thing as adding these elements here. If I go to add a template, you'll notice that I have quite a few different options for adding different layouts. So if I wanted to create a feature list, I click on this and I wait, and it'll be populated on the page. What's nice about this is that it is appended to the end of the page if I already have content on the page, as opposed to replacing everything that I have. This gives me just a nice starting point of organization for content blocks on this page. If I wanted to accomplish the same thing, I could add an element, and the first thing I'm going to add is a row. Rows are nice because they give you options on how to interact with the width of the page if you want to make a row stretch before adding content. In that case, I would recommend putting down a row to contain a collection of content, and then a row within that row where I would create my columns. If I wanted to create a 3-column layout, I could do that. I could grab my images, drag and drop from elsewhere in the page. Sometimes that drag and drop gets a little buggy depending on your browser. There we go. So then I've got 3 images across, and I've got a row within a row, and I can continue to add elements. You saw here that there's quite a few different elements available. The most common ones you'll use will be the row, the text block, maybe a separator. The single image is a popular one as well, if you're just putting an image on the page. And you can even search in this box up here in order to find what you're looking for a little easier. You can also use these tabs that roughly groups the elements by what you might be doing, such as building structure to your page. Specific widgets are here. Being able to add a widgetized sidebar in WordPress widgets is a great feature. We won't get into that much here, but we could add a text block. Then we have the same familiar editor that we've worked in before. Make our text changes. Save those here. Maybe I want to add a button. And all of these different elements have different settings that you can play around with. I want to create a outline button. If I make a custom outline button, I can match it to my custom color scheme as well. Change these different features to what I want. It gives us a little bit of a preview of what we'll see here, but you'll still want to use the WordPress page preview to see what you've actually ended up with. You can see this is the section we just assembled here, 3 images across, some text, and a button that people can click on. Makes it very easy to make a multi-column layout in WordPress. If you want to delete these, just click the trash icon there. And we can continue to build the layout of our page. I mentioned this row within a row as a good strategy based on what you can do with this row. When you have a row within a row, that top level row has an option to stretch. So I can stretch the row or the row and the content. And then I've got design options there as well if I wanted to make a background color in order to break up this content. You'll see that no matter what theme I'm working with, it gives me the ability to completely change the layout of that page by stretching the row across the screen. Obviously that doesn't look so fantastic right now, but it's good to know when you're working with a more full width screen theme that you can override some of those theme settings. Adding more elements is more of the same here. Be sure to look at all of the different settings that you have related to whether you're editing the row, editing the column inside that row, since this is a single column row, or editing the row within the row, or the column within the row. Once again, and then each element has its own settings. One of the most important settings that determines the placement of information here is this little grid here. And this grid represents the spacing and positioning of elements on the page. Most importantly, the space between elements. So it gives you kind of a visual here of what creates space around an element. If you consider this thing in the middle here an image inside a box, padding would give you extra space inside that same element, and you could set a background image behind, or a background color behind that as well. So it would appear kind of like a border, but it would really be the same element here. Then you can create a border, and you can give that a color. If you had a white border, that would appear as kind of blank space. But it's good to know that a border is calculated as part of the size of the element, but it can break a layout. Say if you do proportional widths of a column at 33.33%, and then you add a 10 pixel border, then you'll be breaking those rules of calculating the width of an element. So border, only use that if you know exactly what you're doing. The margin feature here is the space between elements. So this is the space around and pertaining to the same element, and this is the space between. So a background color would show in padding, but not in margin. That would just create white space or whatever the background behind it is between multiple elements. This is very useful for creating space above and below an element. And if you tab around here, it goes in a circular pattern so that you can add stuff here. There are default values to these elements, so if you have a problem with too much space showing up and you come in and put 0 here, it'll override whatever default setting was part of this element. It varies from element to element in Visual Composer. Save your changes on the way out, and there you go. This gives us a little circle here to show us that we have set a background color. Back here in that design options place again, we can also set a background image, and we haven't uploaded any images yet, but drag and drop your image here, and then you have different options as to how that image will be displayed, whether it stretches to fill the space, or whether it repeats in a tiling background. So it gives you lots of options to create those content boxes. Okay, everything else is pretty similar to how WordPress normally works. You saw me use a button there. Just follow the directions and experiment to see what you get. Also, don't be afraid to Google your questions about Visual Composer, because it is a widely supported and widely used plugin, and chances are if you're having problems, you're not the only one to have had them. Okay, that's it for your introduction to Visual Composer. Check out more at 410creative.com if you need additional assistance.